Welcome to the Motherhood Podcast with Denise Waters.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Motherhood. I'm so excited for you to hear this week's podcast. I dive in with my friend Lindsay to talk about motherhood and how having three littles is a lot and how you can lose yourself in that process. What I love most about Lindsay is her true calling and belief in a higher power, in God, to show her the way and the things that matter the most to her. She has me super grounded whenever we're together. She speaks really eloquently about evil and about Satan coming to take away your dreams. And it's not always words that I was comfortable with, but as I spend more time with her, I get to understand how our belief system can work and how we can be moved by a higher power to do our best work. And especially in motherhood, not losing ourselves, especially when we know that there's even more for us. So Lindsay's story is really beautiful. She is an amazing human. I can't wait for you to get to know her a little bit better. All right. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the Motherhood.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here and we are able to make time for this.
Yeah.
I am so excited because your journey is so exciting to me, so different than mine. And so I want to talk about your motherhood journey a little bit, but really about who you are beyond just being a mom. So let's start with the mom part.
Okay.
And before we jump there, who do you think you were before you were a mom?
Well, what's really weird is my friend, one of my best friends that's known me well before I was a mother, all through the party days, right? He called me on my birthday is February 14th, and he called me on February 1st, like at 7 a.m. And I happened to be asleep because it was a terrible night with pains. And my husband took the kids downstairs so I could get like my 3 hours all together in the morning. And he called me, he's like, "Happy birthday month." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess it is almost my birthday." And it was just so different than I told him this recently, like after the fact. I said, when you called me to say happy birthday month, it showed me genuinely how far I had come from that place and how deep I was into motherhood. That I just was like, I used to celebrate the first of the month. And I remember we did. And he even would we would do like every day is like birthday month stuff up until our birthday. And I'm like, wow, I don't celebrate myself in any capacity anymore.
Right. Well, it's hard.
That's how I'm different.
Yeah. It's hard to do when you have three. So tell us how old your kids are and how you became a mom.
Sure. So my son is almost 8 next week. So his party is like coming up really soon. He's super excited. And my daughters are Irish twins, and they're 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So I'm sleepy is basically what that means.
Yeah, 2 and 3 is a lot.
2 and 3 is a lot. It's a journey that I was not prepared for. But I came about being a mother pretty differently, I think, than most other women. I struggled with infertility, my husband and I, for 10 years. And God is just so cool because I was really like not okay, and was getting ready to walk through a surrogacy, and was like, this is it. This is where God has called us, is this surrogacy, right? And we had all agreed that we would do it unless, there's this one thing, and that wouldn't work for us. And so I called to make an appointment, and they're like, yeah, that one thing will happen. And so we can't do that. And so I was like, okay, well, that was a Thursday. And the next day I photographed a family. I was a photographer for like 20 years. The next day I photographed a family who had adopted. And we had already done, we had a failed adoption. We had miscarriages. We had the drugs, the 0%, numbers at the fertility specialist, all that. And, it had been a journey. It had been a really rough journey.
Yeah.
And so we found out on a Thursday that wasn't going to happen for us, the surrogacy. And I was the lowest low I probably have ever been. And on that Saturday, so 2 days later, I photographed a family who had adopted, and they didn't go through an agency. And that struck me as interesting because we went to an agency and they're like, oh, it's $50,000 to $70,000.
Right.
Catch you later.
Right.
We
After
don't
all
have
the expenses you've already had.
$70,000.
Right.
Correct. And so she's like, most people fundraise, and we're just like, that's not us, whatever. So we said no to that right away. And not that we didn't have a heart for adoption, we just couldn't afford it. And I think you also get to a place where you don't want to admit that your problems are as big as they are.
Yeah.
Until they're really huge. So I think that's where I was with fertility. But Thursday I photographed this couple and I said, can I just have coffee with you? And they said, absolutely. Well, the next day I found out about my son. And so I was like, well, this is crazy. And then, so I had to call them and say, so I can't have coffee, but I need your attorney's number. And a week later, I met our son for the first time. And 2 days later, after a friend gave us $12,000 out of his bank account because we were going to take a 401k loan, he's like, no, I got you. God.
Yeah.
We got our son like 2 days later. So we went from the lowest low to the craziest overwhelming high with no preparation.
Right.
And all of my kids are privately adopted. Not once was I on a list. I wasn't fostering. I wasn't doing anything, but I did say in our surrogacy conversation right before we made our appointment, or didn't make our appointment, I said to my friend, why can't God just drop a baby at my door? I would love him.
Right.
And now historically, I've always wanted twin girls, Lila and Lydia. So it's weird that I would have said I would love him.
Right.
2 weeks later, I had him in my arms. So that's my story. And my girls were even sooner. So my oldest daughter was 4 hours from phone call to hospital. So, and all of the, home inspections and financial checks and on a holiday. It was Christmas Eve. So my son went to sleep an only child Christmas Eve and woke up as a brother on Christmas morning.
I just have
goosebumps.
Yeah.
God's just too good. Too good.
Yeah. I have goosebumps on top of my goosebumps because I just love the story so much.
So good.
And it just it reinforces how when we're open to things that they come to us. And that is such an important part to the story.
I think you have to get to the end of yourself.
Yeah.
I think I got finally to the end where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to be the cool aunt and dog mom. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And then God was like, oh, here you go.
Right. Yeah. Are you real?
And again,
Are you
and
sure?
again.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And again.
So amazing. How are you different as a mom than you thought you would be?
Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom and I homeschool. That is the antithesis of what I thought that I always was I'm a very independent person and I love working and I was always a boss. And so I was always managing these big teams and I'm like, I don't have any desire to be a stay-at-home mom. Zero. And then God was just making my job really hard all the time. And it was a job I could have done in my sleep 3 days a week. You know what I mean? And it got awful. And so I had to quit. We just knew all the signs were you have to quit, even though I didn't say it out loud because I didn't want to admit it. And so here, 7 years later, here we are.
And what's your community like around you now that you are home and you're not at work with other people? What does that community look like?
Well, I get really excited to talk to grownups.
Yep.
This is a whole vacation for me. When my husband comes, he works from home, but we have an office in the basement for him. It's finished. It's not some dungeon we'll send him to. It sounded like that when I said that. So I felt the need to clarify. It's a nice space for him. But he'll literally pop up for lunch or after work and I'm like, oh, and he's like, mm-hmm. But he's been talking to adults all day long and I haven't. And so but he's very gracious with me. But I honestly feel like now I really have the community that I meant to have. And I don't believe that I had that until the last several years.
Yeah.
I just feel like most of the people I'm closest to, I don't want to say are new, but historically in my life, they haven't known me as long as some other people, but I feel like they get the more genuine picture.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. Like your values are aligned a little bit tighter.
Yeah. It's not, it's not party days anymore.
Right.
It's not.
Right. And the people who evolve with that. And then there's people that you see for little bits and that.
Yes. We keep joking, a few friends of mine and myself, we're like, we just need a commune. Like, we just need 100-acre woods where we can all let our kids run feral half naked because they're never dressed at my house.
Right. Oh my gosh.
I, like, literally turn around all the time. I'm like, why are you naked?
Yeah.
It's winter. We live in Ohio. It's cold.
Yeah. So, I never thought I would say wear your pants more than I did when the boys were little. And maybe even now.
Yeah. Nobody in my house likes clothes. Not a one of them.
It's a
my
weird,
youngest,
weird
my 2-year-old, I call her my honey badger because she doesn't care about anything. She's a honey badger kid. She's like, what? I don't care. She'll fall down, skin her knees, brush her hands like this, keep walking. I never met a kid like that. And I have a flair for the dramatics, so do most children. And so we really, like, it's a really copacetic relationship, but she's just like, I don't care about you. And she will legit just run out in the backyard naked. Like, she'll just strip all her clothes off. And then I turn around, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm really sorry. Like, if you see a diapered or diaperless 2-year-old running in the backyard, just know I'm fine.
Yeah. Doing the best I can.
Doing everything I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. The motherhood thing is a real journey. And our stories evolve over time. And you and I met through storytelling. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about why stories matter to you and what part of your story do you really want to make sure that your kids know about you?
That's a good question. Well, I think stories are our history. Before we had history books and history class, we had stories. And every family has a great storyteller, I feel like. And I very naturally fit that role my whole life. And I didn't realize it until I was well into adulthood, that was kind of my role in our family. There was no question when, like, my uncle passed away a few years ago of cancer. He was my person. And like, walking down the aisle, he was my person. And he has twin boys. They never had girls. And so I was like the little princess cousin, and I'm sure I wanted my cousins desperately. But when he passed away, there was just no question that I was writing the obituary and I was speaking. And when my grandparents died, it's like, oh, well, Lindsay's going to speak. It's like, is she? Is she now? I'm the youngest. How about you speak? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so I think, stories have this way of coming through generations to generations. And I still remember my great grandmother telling me a story about how her grandmother harbored Jesse James when he was on the run. You know what I mean? And so you think about stuff like that, and the power that story has is ginormous. You just don't realize how integral storytelling is in our culture, but also just historically. And I think, gosh, my kids, what story did you say? What story would they want?
Yeah, what do you want them to know about you? Yeah,
that's hard. I would hope that they would find, like, I think about this, I might cry a little.
It happens.
I write in my Bible, like, a ton. And I have my teen study Bible from when I was a teenager. And I went through a very terrible time as a teen. I was almost murdered by another friend.
Yeah.
And I was dark. You go to this, like, dark place. And my teen study Bible, all of Proverbs and Psalms, is just all of my teenage angst. It's basically like the Holy Alanis Morissette lyrics is basically. And so I remember I gave that Bible to someone who's basically, I call my sister, because we weren't birthed that way, but she's, I could be her mother. I could have been 16 and slutty, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so, but she was going through a tough time and had some suicide ideations. And I gave her that Bible and I said, look, I know that's not your go-to, but it was mine. And I just want you to read my notes and see how low I was. And so I think about that. I think about my kids taking my Bible, whether it's a teen study Bible or the Bible I write now as an adult, and just them creating their own story of my life. Because I do that with my grandma, like in her Bibles and her books that I get to keep. And so that's kind of what I just, that when I was not okay, that's where you could find me.
Yeah, I love that. It also makes me think about the community you create around yourself. Like within minutes of knowing you, I felt in that fold, right? Like that, like, okay, this is how I'm going to know you, and this is how I'm going to take care of you, and this is how we're going to learn together. And that is such a gift that you have.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. And I think that it's especially the way, like, we were at a writer's retreat and we were like super vulnerable, super quickly, like ridiculously.
Little bit.
Yeah. I don't know if that was safe, but I think it was, because what it created was truly that family environment where each of us could pull little other pieces of each other's stories out, and see each other from different perspectives. And it's just like, I get this image of just this light, right? Like just the light that we can bring into the world through our stories. And you definitely do that. As a mom though, right now, like, where is that light not coming through? Like, what do you need right now to feel like full Lindsay?
I need to care for myself.
Yeah.
Being very candid. I tend to I said this at the park the other day to another mom, and she literally looked at me like I was completely nuts. But I said, I think that I'm too available for my children. And she was like, you feel that way? And I was like, yeah, is that?
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Right. Yeah.
There's not, like, nothing's off limits. Like, I have no, like, there's no time for just me. You know what I mean? Like, I explain it this way to my son because he can understand it better than my girls. But I have said to him for the last few years, since he's been a little older, I've said, you and your sisters are the only ones that get to call me mommy. There's no one else in the whole world that gets to call me mommy. And I said, but everyone else calls me Lindsay. And I said, sometimes I need to just be Lindsay.
Yeah.
So that I can be mommy. Mm-hmm. And he kind of, didn't get it at first, but then I started building it into our language.
I love that.
I started saying to him, honey, I'm going to go to dinner with friends now. But why, mommy? I want you to stay home. Like, you got to be with me. And I'd say, I know, but I need to go be Lindsay so that I can be mommy. And he would get it a little bit. And then when one time I said, okay, I'm going out, to dinner with a friend, whatever, or going on a walk or whatever. He's like, you just got to go be Lindsay for a little bit. I was like, yep, I do. But I think I did it. I was better at caring for myself when we just had one.
Yeah.
And then the girls are so close together and so unexpected. And, it sounds crazy, but I'm really only 2 years into this adjustment in my life, right? This ginormous adjustment. 3 if you count Ellie, but 2 if you count just having 3 children.
Right.
And so I think that I just don't care for myself well. And I told my husband, I'm like, our kids are not going to learn how to care for themselves if they just see me slaving for them all day long.
Yeah.
And so the last like month or two has been very transitional for our family, just kind of changing our language and changing the expectations. And, and there's a reason, like our son is pretty neurodivergent and, um, just struggled at emotional regulation and all these things that translated behaviorally, but it was really just brain function. And so he couldn't do things that a normal 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old could do. And so I became just this like overwhelming giver of all the things because he couldn't do them. And now I think this transition period has happened for us because the girls can.
Right.
They can do things different. They're different abled than Carter is. And Carter is amazing now. Not that he wasn't before, but he graduated. We did a program called Brain Balance and it was very expensive and he graduated and he's amazing and is able, but now he's able to do chores and he's able to help around the house and to sit at a restaurant and to go to a grocery store, like things that we couldn't do before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that makes a huge difference. And I think just recognizing that I don't have to parent the girls the same way I parented Carter because they have different needs will allow me this space to be me again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think I'm just in the thick, like these are really hard ages.
Yeah.
Individually. And I have both.
Yeah. And collectively.
And I will for another year and a half. And so, I'm just trying to like give myself grace, but also accountability to take care of myself.
Yeah. I love that you talked about that because I think there's also a culture piece of we are supposed to do all for our kids.
Right.
And that we sacrifice ourselves, for the children and for all of the good things for them. But that doesn't mean that we sacrifice ourselves in that endeavor. Or like, are we doing damage by not letting them do the things that they can do?
Because it's definitely cultural. I think we do that in everything. It's, it's the burnout of working and running the marathons. And, we are a culture that thrives on busy and you're only as valuable as you can produce. And so I think, especially just living in this day and age in America, that's what we do is we're like, oh, well, I got to be better, faster, stronger. I got to keep going. And, I don't necessarily feel that motivation. Like that's not my mentality, but I have definitely prioritized not my son.
Yeah. But now that you are like, how do you know how that came to be? Like, what was the trigger that made you really feel like, oh, I've got to get back to myself?
Well, so I had a little bit of a health scare. And that had me very freaked out. I'm actually okay now. I got my test results just this past week. I don't even think I've even shared that with
you. We didn't even talk about that.
I had us and it looked like I had calcification in my femoral artery. And so he was like very worried. And so I've gone through all these like different doctors and finally had a stress test on my foot, like on my feet. And they're like, everything's completely normal. I'm like, oh, great. So I'm not just going to like pop a blood clot and pass out and die. Right? Great. That's amazing. And so that was a really big relief. And I think honestly, just knowing, I think I'm old too, right? Like I feel pretty old for being a mom. And I wish I was 10 years younger with the age of my children, if I'm being honest. But I'm not. And I've already worked that out with God. I've already shared my distaste for my age versus the age of my children with him. But, and actually it was pretty profound. I was in the shower. It was when I had just had 2 kids and Ellie was probably, my second was probably, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months old, young. And I'm in the shower and I'm crying it out because I noticed Biomom was pregnant again. And I was like, what? And I'm noticing it, like, we about to have a baby. Like, my baby's 5 months old. How is this possible? And so I was crying on my shower floor. Not even standing at this point. Like we are on the floor praying. It's not as dirty as I think it might be, like crying it out. And and I'm not a why God person. I just kept saying, why? why is this? Why am I 40? Like, why am I not 30? Like, I wanted to be done. Like, why?
Right.
And plain as day in my spirit, I heard, you could not give these children
Mm.
spiritually at 30 what you can give them now at 40.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're not wrong, but that'll make it easy. Okay. So I think honestly, the awakening for me was just a health scare and
Yeah.
just kind of taking a moment to think like, whoa, what if
Yeah.
that is the reality? And what am I showing them? I'm not showing them how to care for themselves. I'm not showing them how to prioritize their health, their well-being. They're at this point, they're just going to go and be like, what? The doctor's responsible for me because my mom was responsible for me.
Right.
And so, I think that's kind of what triggered it. And I'll be honest, I'm still kind of in the thick of like trying to figure that out, what that looks like for me. But like just last week, I put like, I'm working on the calendar.
Yeah.
And honestly, it worked out really well. My husband's like, I can honor it better, like if I know. Like, so I think just communicating, like that's how you have to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really amazing. How do you want your kids to describe you?
Funny. I want my kids to think I'm funny. And that I want them to describe me as the person like that they call when they mess up.
Yeah.
I want them to feel very close to me and transparent with me. I know how easy it is to hide stuff from people. And I think that's where Satan lives, is in that hiding stuff from people. And so I hope that they describe me as funny and easy to talk to and, slow to anger.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
That'll come with time, I promise.
We can try.
Yes. It does get easier and then it gets harder and then it gets easier and then it gets harder again. So
I told my husband, I was like, look, I feel like right now it's physically very, very, very hard for us because it's just, constant. I feel like I bend over to pick stuff off my floor at least 6,000 times a day. And that is not an exaggeration. And I told Todd, I'm like, I just feel like as the kids get older, it's like the physical goes down and the mental goes up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I feel. So I'm making the physical part of it. And so,
yeah, absolutely.
But I feel like I'm really well suited for the mental part. And so I feel like maybe I'm not, maybe that's just really naive, but I just feel like if I can get through this physically draining season, then I'd have a lot more to offer them.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like for me, like I grew with my kids, right? And I think you're doing the same thing. And you learn, and maybe you're 2 steps ahead of them sometimes, and maybe you're 10 steps ahead of them sometimes, and maybe you're on the same step. But you're figuring it out as you go. And when they see that you're figuring it out with them, I think there's some real grace there that they get to learn that we're not perfect and that we're not trying to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. What's next for you? How are we going to keep Lindsay at the center?
Well, I mean, I'm a writer and a speaker. I'm actually, so last year was my first time speaking to like any type of like actual audience.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of expanding my training right now. I am attending a speaker's training in Nashville in a few weeks. And, just I feel like God has given me a lot of revelations when it comes to a personal ministry that I have been working on. I have a co-writer, Steph Weber, you might know her. And so she and I are working on a book. At our writers retreat, we rearranged a bunch of stuff that we thought was in line and it wasn't. And so just working with her to get that, into the hands of some publishers. We do have an agent, so we're just trying to see if hopefully we can kind of get that off the ground. But just really speaking and writing, I feel like God has given me a personal message to share. I'm pretty funny. I say that not as like conceited, but just the truth is I'm funny. And I feel like there was a place for that humor in this like spiritual realm. And I think just embracing my humor with some sort of personal message is really my sweet spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I'm at. Like I did a, stand-up session, a few months ago, and just seeing where that goes. So
Yeah,
that's
I
what's
love
up
it.
with me.
That's awesome. Well, Lindsay, I really feel like your calling is one that a lot of moms will resonate with. And I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. And I can't wait to see what comes and to see how the kids grow and how you continue
Thank you.
to be a big, strong influence in the world.
Thank you.
So thank
I have
you.
one more thing to say that I kind
Yeah.
of forgot. When you ask someone what they're working on and what they're doing as a stay-at-home mom who homeschools, it's
Yeah.
really easy to let that question overwhelm me and make me feel some sort of guilt
I
that
love
I'm
that.
not working like as hard as I should. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the reality is what I'm doing is very challenging aside from any calling that I have.
Yeah.
And you and I kind of touched on it briefly, but like before this, I just feel like, it's something that needs to be said is, I have a call on my life to write and to speak and to minister to other people with my humor. And I have been very, very, very lost in the season of overwhelming motherhood,
Yeah.
like in that season of toddler motherhood. And I have even told God, okay, I'll let it go. I don't want to do it anymore. It's no big deal. Like,
Yeah.
catch me being a homeschool mom, baking my own sourdough bread. I don't care. Like, whatever. Like, let's just do that. And the reality is, as soon as I told God I didn't want to continue, that I said, okay, I misunderstood. This is where I'm at. The enemy was really quick to come in and force me into more busyness with my motherhood. And God was more willing to give me all of these next steps that I need to do. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until I finally surrendered and said, I'm not going to do it anymore, that Satan was like, oh, good. I can distract her with motherhood. And there's nothing wrong with digging in and being the mother
Right.
to your children. That's literally what we're called to do. But it will grieve the Holy Spirit if you say no to the calling that God has put in your heart.
Yeah.
And so for me, I am in a weird season because I'm right at that juxtaposition between recognizing that Satan has been manipulating my motherhood versus like not grieving the Holy Spirit and moving forward into both and
Right.
trying to find the balance between callings.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something important that needs to be said. Don't let Satan manipulate your motherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the piece too of like dual calling is real, right? Like yes and is so real in our lives that we can do one thing and the other at the same time. We don't have to choose.
We don't have to choose. And I have very much been forcing myself into a choice.
Yeah.
And I think it was the enemy just trying to get me to stay away from the people that I know I'm meant to speak to.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah. As will happen, right? It will all come at us.
He heard it. He was like, oh, go waiting to say this.
Right.
I've been waiting for the day I could distract you with these crazy kids.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I just so appreciate you. And I just am so excited to see your face. And
same.
it's been such a good day. So thank you for this. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much, Denise.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for the Motherhood Podcast. Please subscribe and like so that we can keep bringing you more episodes.